out your accent. That's all you need.
Well, hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this lovely Wednesday for another Facebook Live with Napa Valley Wine Academy. Really excited about today's topic, a very bubbly topic indeed. I'll just tease it a little bit before I bring my two guests on screen here. As a reminder, we're here every Wednesday, 2 p.m. for study hall, so get ready to learn something. Today is no exception. And instead of one guest, we have two guests, so bonus for you today. I'm going to bring onto the screen the lovely Catherine Bouguet from Napa Valley Wine Academy, one of our superstars and one of the co-founders of Napa Valley Wine Academy. You've brought along a special guest today, Catherine. Who do you have for us?
I sure did. Thank you so much, Christian. So today I'm very, very excited to have Jamario Villa on with us. And Jamario, you're going to love him by the end of this session. It only takes a minute, but he's Italian born, LA based. He's a master taster. He has the equivalent of WSET Diploma, but he presents for many different corporations and institutions, Getty Museum, UCLA Extension, Italian Cultural Institute. I don't want to take up too much time, but his bio is long and diverse. He splits his time between California and Europe, and he is the U.S. ambassador for Franciacorta. So, of course, we're going to use the sparkling wines of DOCG Franciacorta to take through the WSET SAT today. But super excited to have Jamario on with us. Jamario.
I'm excited here. Thank you for the beautiful presentation. Indeed, I am a fish who likes to swim in different waters. I learned that from my family, and today I'm here as a brand ambassador for Franciacorta. I know it sounds rhetorical, but it is a pleasure and an honor because we're talking about fabulous wine and a wine region that made the history of Italy, not only in Italy, but also around the world. And it's a tough job, but we will have to taste a few wines on your name. And we're going to share some information and open to answer questions and to spread the word of good wine, first of all, and then today, Franciacorta, of course.
I love it. Thank you so much, Jamario. Why don't we start off, before we dive into the SAT, why don't you tell us just a little bit about, the region itself, something.
For sure. Yeah. Let's start by two things. Where are we and what is it? So we're talking, you can see from this beautiful picture, actually, when I had the chance to pick from the many they sent me, I picked this one because you see the Alps in the background, the Iseo Lake. So we are in north of Italy, the deep north. We are right by Switzerland, so far away from the stereotypes of the sunny Mediterranean south or central, which I adore, by the way. We're talking about extreme condition, high altitude, bordering Switzerland, literally a stone throw from Milan. A pretty small area, after all, 200 square kilometers about, and a little over 3,000 hectares of vineyards. And we're going to talk later about this, but 62% are certified organic, which these days is pretty important to remember. Like I said, lake of glacier origin from the north, the Oglio River on the west side, and the northeast, the Rhaetian Alps. So as you know, it's a wide region, the Alpine region. Here we have the Rhaetian ones, and the town of Brescia in the south. Franciacorta, I would like to say, what does it mean, the etymology for a moment, because it comes from Curte Franca. Curte Franca was free courts in terms of taxation. Back in the Middle Age, there were areas where the Clunian monks from Burgundy and Cistercian monks from all around Italy arrived to start farming and agriculture and viticulture in particular. The best osterias at that time were extension of the monasteries, okay, where they were selling wine and also hosting socially people. So that's the etymology. And today is actually under the umbrella Franciacorta, we have one word to identify three concepts. One is the land method. Franciacorta is strictly a barrel from a secondary fermentation. So it's a wine from secondary fermentation barrel. It's also a wine district, and is also a wine kind. So we have three concepts already there in one word. Now, I think it's good to remember that no matter what wine we talk about, but in particular Franciacorta, we're talking about the influence of Mother Nature and the influence of the humankind. So we can also justify the differences between wines to wines label to labels and district to district, despite the same production method or a similar production method. Franciacorta, in particular, benefit of a very peculiar micro and microclimate. Actually, I like to say wine comes from three conditions mostly: meteorology, geography and geology, and history and culture, which is the human portion. Don't forget that we make wine to drink wine. It's a business, a big business today, but it's also a pleasure. So the style we make is what we want to drink is extremely important. That's the human effect. But we cannot forget about Mother Nature, because the soil we have, the sun that goes around our head, the wind blowing, the mountains, the terroir in terms of micro, and the surrounding in terms of macro are affecting to the point that no matter what you like, Mother Nature will always prevail. Yes. So it's not about what you want; it's about what she wants. So we're going to keep in mind the latitude, deep north, the altitude, the proximity to the Alps, the benefit from the lake that during summer can mitigate the temperature and during winter can spread some heat by retaining the heat from the surface of the water, as well as the geography and the look at this beautiful photo. I mean, I insisted on keeping this photo because you can see from the snow pretty much all the way through March, depending on the year. So we have a very cold climate, but as we were chatting, me and Catherine, a few days ago, the Lake of Iseo, which maybe is not as famous as Lake of Como, but it's a marvel of nature with a regional park inside, can help during winter, helping the sugar increasing slowly during the season and reach that ripeness that we need to produce the wine as we know.
It's such a special area. I mean, to have the influences, like in the summertime when it starts to warm up, you still have that cool air coming down from, the mountains. And then you have the mitigating factor of the large lake. I mean, just beautiful conditions for maintaining the acidity, for making premium sparkling wine. I always call, of course, Franciacorta Italy's best bubbles. Maybe I'm a little biased, but could you tell us, Giamario, a little bit about the grape varieties we're going to see in
yes. Open and close parentheses. Let's not forget that what makes a good wine is the grapes need to suffer. So we need cold, we need heat, we need temperature excursion, day and night, summer and winter. We need diversity of environment and climate. So we don't want a flat, stable condition of the weather. So when we talk about the Alps, of course, that's the best case scenario. In terms of grapes, we see some picture of grapes right here. Pinot Nero, we call it the Italian way, as well as Pinot Bianco, Chardonnay, and Herba Mate, which is a novelty in terms of production, not from the area. Herba Mate was already is part of the viticulture since the Renaissance. And the very first mention was already about 500 years ago. But today is allowed up to 10%. But only the 2020 vintage will have Herba Mate in the actual wine because it's very recently introduced in the production methods.
So this is breaking news for all of you out there, because it's just 2020 that the Herba Mate can be used.
Exactly. And it's a late ripener with strong acidity. So I think it fits very well in the blend, and the idea to keep low for now, so you can test the influence and the effect on the wine. It's a clever move from the Consortio di Gran Franciacorta, which today, by the way, is my saint and protector. I represent the Consortio, and I'm happy to do so today.
Great. So let's, I say we talk about the three wines we're going to taste today. And so the different styles, right? So why don't you take us through the three styles that we're going to be tasting today?
Absolutely. So first of all, let me give you a very quick preview on what a Franciacorta is. We can have a non-vintage Franciacorta with Chardonnay, Pinot Nero, Pinot Bianco, up to 50% of the blend, and Herba Mate up to 10%. Then we have rosé, which is Pinot Nero up to 35, sorry, minimum to 35. And then we have Chardonnay, maximum 65, Pinot Bianco 50, and Herba Mat 10. And then we have vintage and Riserva. And the differences are mostly the aging period on the lees, being a secondary fermentation on the bottle. That's, as we know all, it's the most delicate step, the kind of yeast we add, and the length, of course, and the barrel pressure and so forth. So we go from the 18 months minimum of a non-vintage to the 24 of a Satèn. We're going to talk about Satèn in a moment. And then the 30 months of a vintage and the 60 month of a Riserva, which, by the way, in the panorama of the metodo tradizionale or metodo classico, it's very high as a minimum aging period. I like to remind these are minimum, so it's also up to the winemaker to extend that period in relation to the kind of wine they want to offer.
Mm-hmm. Great. And before we pick up that first glass, I think it's interesting to know that, Franciacorta put regulations on themselves. The producers got together for their DOCG before they had the DOCG certification. They got themselves together and put regulations on themselves saying, we can produce premium, sparkling wines here. And so they restricted themselves greatly. And they got that DOCG no problem because they had already, said, we produce these premium wines. We're going to have these regulations so that our wine tastes like this and is this quality level. I just think that's amazing. Even before they had to restrict themselves, they did that on purpose because their sole goal, again, was to be Italy's best bubbles.
It's serious business. And like you said, when anticipate the law, the legislator, it shows the care you have for your product, the ethic that you apply to your work, and also the goal that you want to achieve. In 1960, we had the first, basically, Franciacorta, and in that case, we had Franco Ziliani as a leader, pioneer, but 67 is really the year of the DOC, and the 95 the year of the DOCG. But in between, there is a lot of work. And like you mentioned, all these producers getting together, tasting, over tasting. And we talk about Satèn. I have a beautiful story about this.
All right, great. Well, why don't we start off, with the tasting? I think some of our, viewers are here today to say, hey, let's take a sparkling wine through the WSET. So I'll take it through the level 3, but I'll give a few, tips on level 4 as well for anybody out there. But of course, with our sparkling wine, we're going to do, we're using the same SAT card as you do for a still wine, and we are going to pretty much take it through the same exact, levels that we do. There's an added one, of course, because in the level 3, we'll be talking about mousse. But let's just start from the beginning. When we talk about the appearance, of a wine, we're still talking, the points lie with intensity and color. And so just like for a still wine, you're going to angle down your wine at 45-degree angle, and you're looking for the saturation of color, between the core and the rim. So you're looking for, do you have a wide, watery rim? Then you're going to be pale. If the color saturation goes up closer to the rim, then you're going to be medium. If your color saturation goes all the way up to the rim, then you're going to be deep. For this wine that I have here, this is a vintage 2009, where you're getting to a deeper concentration here, a deeper intensity. And so I'm seeing this saturation go up further towards the rim. We have a beautiful medium intensity here. It wouldn't be tough for you to see from home, but it is a nice medium intensity. When we go to the color, generally, oh, that's perfect. Thank you, Jamario. When we go to the color, we're generally choosing between lemon and gold, right? Gold is when you have some brown or orange, to the color of the wine. So you're showing some age. Well, of course, it's no surprise that this 2009 is showing some age, and we've got a gorgeous gold color. I mean, it's just a stunningly beautiful gold color. So that's it. I mean, that's pretty much our points, for the appearance. There is no point or no mark for discussing the bubbles, right? You're not looking, at the stream of bubbles and commenting on them. You can go ahead and note that you see bubbles in other observations, but when it comes to scoring your wine, there's 0 marks and 0 points available for just mentioning bubbles. But of course, you can go ahead and add it to your note, but 0 points there. So we head right off to the nose. And when I talk about the nose, Jamaro, please jump in with your beautifully eloquent speak when you talk about the aromas that you get. I'll start us off, but then really look forward to you jumping in here.
I like to, actually, let me tell you a couple of descriptors that jump in my mind earlier when I tasted wine, and now that I refresh my memory. First of all, you mentioned it's a 2009 vintage, and can we say it's a dosaggio zero? A pas dosé, because it's not an everyday.
Yes.
It's not an everyday drinking and having an 11 plus years old wine. It's really incredible. But when I first approached, my nose, and I was trying to consider the primary aromas and the evolution of the wine, immediately I had that perception of that brioche with apricot jam I was eating for breakfast in my youth at the corner cafe of my high school. So that was a sort of an epiphany, a Madeleine I had. And then, of course, the age changes the perception, at least the age or the fragrance and the intensity of the descriptor, so that laurel note is a bit more evident and the grapefruit is a bit more gentle. The acacia is coming out, and then the little toasted corn and walnuts. It's really a charming nose, because with, by the way, very small and fine bubbles. I really like this color. So those are the descriptor that came to my mind first, Lizzie.
No, that's beautiful. So the first thing, let's get our points right for our nose. The points lie. Anybody out there remember how many points you get on the nose? How many total points for the nose section? It's actually 7. 7 points for the nose section, 1 for the intensity of the aromas, 5 marks are available for aromas, and 1 mark for the development, the aroma development. So let's go ahead and do the intensity. You go ahead and you want to put your nose to the glass. If you're able to smell everything and fully describe the wine without actively sniffing, you're going to call it pronounced. I go ahead and I put my nose in here, and it's not a pronounced, like say like a Riesling or a very aromatic grape variety wine. I go ahead and I swirl, I smell, and I'm definitely in the medium camp. Once I'm in the medium camp, I then have to open it up and say, okay, am I medium minus? Do I stay at medium, or do I bump it up to medium plus? So in that realm, once I smell this wine, so much, once I go ahead and actively sniff, there is so much here, as Jamario noted, where I have to bump it up to medium plus. And it's everything from, there's some beautiful red apple, the fresh primary here still, but then there's a lovely sort of dried apple component adding beautiful complexity. There's this dried, just beautiful. Well, there's fresh blossom, as Jamario mentioned, acacia. If you've heard me do a note before, you know that, I know that people are from different countries here. We saw you from all over, from Hungary and Italy and France, different flora and fauna. If you smell white flowers, but you're not quite sure which one, put blossom. Blossom will get you, that point, but there's a beautiful floral aspect to this wine.
Catherine, sorry, yep. Can I reveal a little secret? Just between me and you, okay? We're going to talk a bit more later, but I want to give a preview on something. You mentioned floral notes, and you were talking about intensity. We have a beautiful map to show to our guests, but I'm going to show you something. When we talk about the floral importance of a Franciacorta, at least, you see this map. This is a bit artisanal. We have a better one to show you, okay? But the reddish note, the reddish color, correspond to the area where the floral note is more evident and typical, which is on the east portion of the district. While when we talk about the intensity, the power of the fragrances of our bouquet, it's more typical on the orange section, which are also typical of the eastern portion. So we're going to see why, but it's interesting to connect the dots and also do a little bit of after work, turn the bottle, check the label, where the winery is located, where the vineyards are located, where the fruit come from, and try to understand also the background of the wine and why that note is more evident than another one.
I love it. Where can guests find this map, Jamario?
Well, for sure, you can go to franciacorta.net, N-E-T, and you can go in the English section and also download this map and others. There is a HD map, and we're going to provide to the Academy, to our wonderful partner, all the educational material we have, so you can also refer to Catherine to have exclusive material maybe you don't find normally to the website of franciacorta.net.
Great, beautiful. So you can hold us to that. All right, great. So when we talked about the intensity, we have that medium plus intensity here. We're seeing, some dried fruit character. So we're seeing some tertiary here, right? We're seeing a nuttiness. There's some beautiful marzipan. So we have tertiary here. Remember, when you think of aromas, you have to think in terms of primary, secondary, and tertiary. And so we still, I can't believe with this 2009, I'm still getting some primary, that I can note. That beautiful apple, that rich pear, but then that beautiful, there is a little bit of secondary. Well, there's a lot of secondary, because secondary also includes our yeastolysis, right? Our bread, our yeasty, and there's a beautiful sort of toasted brioche, here. But there's also a little bit of sort of toast. Maybe, Jamario, do you have a little bit of oak influence here?
Yes, it's partially fermented in barrique, and is really mild, and I like that because I usually compare. I'm sorry for my non-ethical sometimes or politically correct comparison, but for me, oak and makeup sometimes work in a parallel way. You can enrich the beauty, or you can cover what is the primary beauty, the one coming from the DNA, and get a bit vulgar. So here the oak is a small piece of the puzzle and leaves a lot of room to the primary aromas, which after 11 years is a beautiful thing to detect from the DNA of the grapes, actually. So
beautiful. It's just so elegant. There's this just beautiful, light, toasty, component. So beautiful. So we've got primary, secondary, and tertiary here. Remember, 5 total marks, but don't ever write just 5. You're going to write at least 7. And with this wine, you better be writing 10. Actually, there are not sparkling wines on the level 3 exam. But of course, you can encounter, Franciacorta has been on the level 4 exam in both theory and it was in tasting. At least once. I think, did we lose the picture of Jamario for a minute? Well, I'll keep going with the tasting. Okay, that's okay. I'll keep going with the tasting. So for the level 3, we also have that 7th mark is going to be for the development. And so we want to call the wine youthful if it has just primary and or secondary. So please never forget that youthful also includes secondary. So it's only when you go ahead and have some tertiary that you move it off to developing, or even further to fully, developed. However, with this wine, we can still go ahead and pick out primary, pick out secondary, and what's separate from tertiary. And so we can go ahead and call this wine developing. At 2009, a vintage 2009, it is still developing. And don't forget, for those of you who are out there who are candidates for the level 4, you do not need to comment on the development. It's something that's very tough in any event, because sometimes you can get something like honey in a wine, and it's a tertiary. For those of you in level 3, it's a tertiary, but sometimes you can get a fresh honey. And so it can be confusing, that it's just, noted in the tertiary and not the primary. So I think that has been done away with in the level 4. So just keep that in mind. Now, I just want to also mention that, we skipped over, right? We went in the appearance, we've gone through just the intensity, the color. We didn't talk about the look of the bubbles. There's no mark for that for the level 3 or the level 4. So many things can play around with that. A dirty glass, something.
Well, hello everyone. Looks like we had a little bit of a technical issue here with Skype, so I'm going to try to get my two hosts back. One moment, please. And sorry for the interruption, but it looks like we lost connection with Skype. So let me add those two great presenters back. Okay. Well, here you are.
So sorry.
Can you see me? Can you see me?
Absolutely, we could see you.
Yeah,
oh,
we have you.
Sorry about
we have
that.
you all back.
I did.
Thanks,
I
everyone,
did pay the bills. I did pay the bills.
So
a little excitement never hurt anyway.
Exactly. So I will hand you back over to Catherine and.
Great, thank you so much. So I'll just say again quickly, just in case you didn't hear me, the appearance of bubbles is not important. We're going to talk about the mousse, the texture of the mousse when it comes to the level 3. But, again, appearance, nose, those things, we're not noting the bubbles at all. Like I said, with the level 3, you could mention it as another observation, but there's 0 points related to it. So now we've gone through the appearance, we've gone through the nose, and now we're going to move off to the palate. So we're going to talk about sweetness, of course. And when you look at that sweetness scale, we have to talk about whether the wine is dry, off dry, medium sweet, or sweet. Now, don't forget, you're using the same scale that you do with other wines, with still wines. Sweet is going to be your Sauternes or your Tokai. Right? Medium dry and medium sweet, the wines are going to, perceptively, you're going to have as a characteristic of the wine, sweetness. Like it would be bad if you didn't mention that there was a sweet characteristic to the wine. However, it's not sweet enough to be a dessert wine or to pair with a sweet dessert. So medium dry and medium sweet, go ahead and show that there's the characteristic of sweetness in the wine, but not sweet enough to be a dessert wine or to pair with dessert. If that sweetness carries through all the way to the finish, call it medium sweet. If it stops before the finish, you'll call it medium dry. Is it on the drier end or on the sweeter end? Is sort of what you're looking at here. And of course, off dry is just, wait a minute, am I detecting that something's, there's a little bit of sweetness here. You've been just detecting it. It's not just a clever name, off dry. And then, of course, dry is you perceive the wine as dry. None of this, it's not for you to know the grams per liter and then to relate that grams per liter to it. It's your perception of the sweetness level. So keep that in mind. It's your perception. And so for this wine, for our 2009, the perception is dry. And of course, Jamario, as you may have heard, this is a 0 dosage wine. Of course, he'll say it beautifully, elegantly. Is it dosaggio 0?
Dosaggio zero, you passed the test. Yes, it's a wine that, of course, after the degorgement, doesn't have any sugar in the liqueur d'expedition. It's just a base wine, and we will skip on the sugar gram per liter according to the WSET standard. But I want to say something that you probably all of you know. The part of the tongue that has the perception of sweetness is the tip of your tongue. So in doubt, pay literal attention to your taste buds, because you have sour, salty, and bitter on the side and at the bottom of the tongue, while the tip right here is the one you can stimulate with an extra taste and detect the sweetness level as perception.
Thank you, Jamario. So I do detect, sweetness when I detect it, on the tip of my tongue. So for anybody who has trouble with that, just go ahead and taste one of the Sauternes or the Tokai and see where it hits you, on your palate, so that you can, gain that perception on your own palate. So we're going to go ahead and call this a dry wine. When it comes to acidity, remember it's almost like putting on an acid hat. You only want to think about, if you're salivating and how long you're salivating after you expectorate, right after you spit. It's not where you feel it on your mouth. It's not. Only concentrate on your salivation, which I know doesn't sound good, but it works, believe me. So you want to go ahead, and it's terrible to do because we think of sipping this, beautiful, sparkling wine slowly, but you need to take a big old mouthful of the wine, swish it around like mouthwash, go ahead and spit, expectorate, and then you want to see, are you pooling? You're right. Are you salivating? And do you keep salivating? You can use a count-off system for how many seconds. Generally for me, it's, Mississippi's, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. If I hit 3, it's a medium acidity. If it goes past that, it's 4. If it keeps going, it's 5. And if I hit that over 4, then I'm high. And so this wine, not surprisingly, we're talking about these beautiful sparkling wines with those cooling influences, from those alpine influences, as well as the Lake Zao that moderates the climate. We've got beautiful conditions for sparkling wine and maintaining acidity in these grapes. So we've got this high acidity here. So again, just concentrate on your salivating. Tannin, we don't talk about, even with a rosé wine, because we've got this beautiful rosé that we'll, be showing you. In fact, well, I'll just...
Sorry, Catherine, the more you say salivation and acidity, the more comes an idea of food pairing in my mind. So when it's time to talk about it, I want to give a hint of the idea of pairing some food with this wine.
I love it. Beautiful. Let's talk about that. We now that I'm just happen to be showing, this rosé, which also has, incredible acidity here. Let me just do a quick diversion about this color, this beautiful color of this wine, because at the level 3, you've got choices of pink, salmon, and orange, right? Orange is going to be very rare. Salmon is going to have a hint of orange in it. And this has a hint of orange instead of being just pink. And so this is a beautiful salmon color. Those of you who are in level 4, of course, the SAT is a little bit different, and they've changed the name of salmon to pink orange, as you can see here on the diploma chart. So it's called pink orange, and this would be a beautiful pink orange, since we just talked about the rosé. Okay, but back to the palate, for our other wine. We're not going to talk about tannin. Even on the rosé, we're not going to talk about the tannin level. There's no points for it. When we go ahead and talk about alcohol, generally we're talking about medium alcohol for these sparkling wines. The body of the wine, this is something, here, a lot of sparkling wines can be medium minus, even light, intensity. But there's a beauty, and I want Jamario in a minute to just talk about this, because the body in these wines, this vintage, it has this increased concentration, of course, from age, but it almost has a medium plus body to it. You're talking about the weight, that it sits on your palate, right? So there's beautiful weight, and even, the Satèn, which is this, beautiful silky wine. In fact, why don't you talk about body, Jamario, for a minute? These wines, this beautiful body that these sparkling wines have, and then maybe talk about Satèn, why you would expect, sort of silky, beautiful body in that style category.
Well, 2 things about the body, which brings to the structure of the wine. Pinot Noir, which is minimum 35% on a rosé, and is also, by the way, about 50% of the dosage of Vero in the wine we're drinking. In case of Pinot Noir growing from a morainic soil, it translates in the resulting wine as a fuller body aspect. So there is not only the possible extension on skin contact to extract more fragrances and color and so forth, but it's actually what Mother Nature gives you. A soil with the drainage that we characterize by the morainic soil, extra mineral content is mineral over mineral, because when the glacier arrived from north and arrived to what is today the Lake of Iseo, split in two parts, add to a layer of mineral soil already existing around 10,000 years ago, an additional layer of minerals that is resulting in the wine as a bigger body perception. And also, this is, I think, a very key point for a food pairing. When you were talking about succulence, I was thinking, salivation, succulence, to harmonize the pairing. A beef carpaccio with a bean salad for the dosage zero would be a great idea. We don't want to open a Franciacorta to celebrate something or to have with appetizer. Think broadly. I rediscovered a few years ago the pleasure of dining with sherry all the way through, from fino to palo cortado. So the same thing with Franciacorta, rediscover the pairing. And as I like to say in love, of course, yin and yang, beta and alpha can work, but harmony is the key for a long-term relation. In the same case for wine and food. If you talk to a chef, food is the most important. You talk to the sommelier, wine must prevail. I believe in harmony. So that balance is key for the pairing. Satèn, talking about Satèn, and I want to show you also. Well, I'm not going to show you the color. I'll let you do this, actually. I'm going to tell you a brief story about Satèn, because it's peculiar to Franciacorta. Satèn, in the early 90s, happened a very important enological zonation of Franciacorta. That is sort of the birth and the legislation system of these wines, okay? But the point of Satèn is that a panel of taster, journalists, winemakers, they all got together over the excitement of this new style that was particularly smooth and creamy to identify the true identity of Satèn. Of course, they wanted 84 samples. Then they decoded the Satèn, and they came out with this word, by the way, which is a combination of satinato, which is frosted, and silk, which is seta. Just because it's an evocative word, also very musical, perfectly Italian style, to explain what is a tactile, a very tactile way of drinking, a creaminess, a softness. And that's the key point, because Satèn, instead of the other Franciacorta, between 5 and 6 atmosphere, is below 5 atmospheres. So lower barrel pressure, slower bottle fermentation, Blanc de Blanc only, Chardonnay and Pinot Bianco up to 50%, no herba mate on the scene. So all together gave the birth to this silky, sexy, charming, easy to please way of drinking. And last but not least, Satèn can only be brut. As a typology of wine, which opens the door to a wide food pairing. Since I say food, I think about food, and go away from the usual Parmigiano, Reggiano, Cradopanano, prosciutto. No, embrace grilled bluefish, baked pasta. Embrace something more with character, because we have a wine with character.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love it. And you're making me hungry, and I had lunch.
That's the goal.
Beautifully said, Jamario. I think, just you heard him mention many different food items. Franciacorta, because of all the different styles, I mean, you can take, you can have just Franciacorta throughout a whole meal, even pairing it with the main dish, with meat dishes, when you have something, with the body, like this vintage wine, with it has the body, the intensity and the concentration, to match up to, main dishes, which is just incredible. But anyway, I will continue on with our discussion of the SAT. When we talk about, I mentioned the body of these wines. So this wine happens to have a medium plus body, beautiful weight, on the tongue. We do have the addition at level 3 of mousse, and you do need to cover mousse here. So you'll see delicate, creamy, and aggressive are your choices. And here's how you want to differentiate and use each one. Delicate is for something like this wine that we're tasting now, this 2009, that shows some age, or maybe lower pressure, like with our Satèn. And when we're saying Satèn, it's Satèn, There's an accent there. But the Satèn is a special style of wine, I think you heard, but it has to be lower pressure, 5 atmospheric, instead of the usual, 5.56 atmospheric pressure, which is part of the reason why it's so silky, as Jamar so more eloquently explains. But, so we have that, mousse that we do need to talk about. And the delicate is, very fine and soft, like very fine, soft, and elegant, as opposed to something that is, the aggressive is something where, like sometimes with young sparkling wines, or with some tank fermented wines, there's just this, they're extremely lively in a big burst. They sort of explode on your palate, but then it's just like a quick blast and then they're gone. That's not considered as fine, as high quality as something that is a little more fine or soft. Creamy, it describes many, it's probably the majority of sparkling wines have a creamy mousse. And that's like, there's enough liveliness there, right? It provides enough liveliness on the tongue, but it's not that frothy aggressiveness. So consider it sort of, in the middle there. The beautiful, it's just the Goldilocks just right. So for this wine, we've got this beautiful age on it. It's showing that fine, soft, beautiful mousse. Now, level 4 for you diploma candidates out there, you are not talking about the mousse per se. You don't have that category in the SAT. As you can see here, where you can note it if you want is only about the texture. So when you see here the flavors, right, you have marks for flavors, primary, secondary, and tertiary at the diploma level. And there's 4 marks available for flavors at the diploma level. But you could either, well, first of all, you could have just 4 flavors mentioned, descriptors, or you could have 3 flavor descriptors mentioned and then include an other observation. And that other observation would be about the texture, of the wine, especially when we're talking about sparkling. That's usually, what it will add to a wine is texture. So pétillance, you would ignore that. That has nothing. You're not saying that this has, bubbles. This pétillance is just for still wines only, like with a Vinho Verde, if you happen to notice, some dissolved CO2 spritz. So that is not used at all for sparkling wines. So if you feel like the texture, is something of note in your sparkling wine at the diploma level, this is where you would note it, and something about the texture, of those bubbles. Are they fine? Are they aggressive? So you would note that there, but only if it is something that you need to speak of. I would always still go ahead and do at least 4 flavor descriptors. And then still, if you have something of note to say about the texture, that it's particularly creamy or, frothy or such, then add that on. So that's where you're talking about that. And then I'll be talking about this later, but the only other place that you're going to mention your mousse and that texture, again, is when you're talking about the quality. And so we'll talk about that in a minute. So again, there is mousse that you need to comment on at the level 3, and these are beautifully fine bubbles. This is a beautiful fine mousse. Flavor intensity matches that nose intensity. We've got this medium plus. We mentioned, the aromas, pretty much the flavors match the aromas. We've got that beautiful, well, who remembers how many points are available for flavors at the level 3? Anyone? Is it 5, 4, 3? Okay, it's 3. So there's 3 full marks available for flavors at the level 3. And for a wine like this, you'd have to have at least 1 in the primary category, at least 1 in the secondary category, and at least 1 in the tertiary, because all those 3 types exist in the wine. So that means that if you forget to add a tertiary, you just noticed you just put sort of red apple and pear, and you noticed sort of brioche, you could not get full marks. You have to have a tertiary here because there is beautiful dried apple, that marzipan. There's so many. There's a list of like 10 things you could list off, that are available here. Okay, so that's for our flavors. And of course, again, at the level 4, if you want in other observations, you can talk about that beautiful texture. The finish here is long for this wine. In fact, I think for all 3 of these wines, when we talk about them, you've got this beautiful, just long lingering flavors that go, they mentioned that a beautiful long finish is, a minute or more. No problem, here with that wine at all. I'm going to pause before I just talk about quality for a little bit. In our last, sort of my last few minutes, I'm just going to give a brief few comments about quality in general and how we do it with the SAT, but sort of bring, Jamario sort of back in, talk about the, anything you want to talk about with sort of the quality of the region.
The charter school of my daughter. No, I'm joking. I want to say to the descriptor that while you were talking, I was trying to reach back because I think the describing wine is a beautiful way of communicating, because you share what is in the glass. It's a scientific approach, absolutely, but you share your memories. And when I found in the Satèn the tangerine peel, the peach blossom, the daffodils, I found the memories of my personal life, but there is an objective component and a subjective component. What we need to agree is not necessarily the term daffodil, is the idea of a ripe flower, of a very yellow flower that indicates the ripeness of the fruit and what goes with it, because it's a creamy texture and so forth. So I think it's a beautiful exercise to taste together, to get together online these days. And also a brief mention of the rosé, which, it's an unexpected beauty to me. I'm always skeptical on the rosé because it's very popular right now, but then, he wins over me right now. And I found that, again, this brioche with apricot jam inside, wild cherry, apple skin, wild strawberries, it's a beautiful harmony. And again, to use another metaphor, sometimes a solo instrument is giving us a sweet melody, but when you have a harmony of a chorus all together, of an orchestra, or with different, like this is what happened with different descriptor or different category, from ethereal to evolution to primary aromas and so forth. We have an orchestra of different instruments that all together play a beautiful and charming melody. And this is what happened in the best wines, Franciacorta, but any other wines out there, really. I want to close with one number, and then Amir, if you have another question, of course, I want to close the conversation with you. 1570. I'm a little, I don't want to say the word dork, but I'm a very passionate on history. I majored in history and politics back in Italy at the university, and I teach at the Renaissance department of UCLA, and I have a lot of lectures about these topics. And when I read that Girolamo Conforti in 1570 commented over the mordacious wine of Franciacorta, referring to the already widespread habit of drinking sparkling wine, it gives you the perspective of the kind of made in Italy we're talking about, a wine that has the roots in tradition, in deep tradition from the Renaissance period already. So last aspect I want to mention, speaking about history, culture, human effect, is the made in Italy. When you drink Franciacorta, it's not rhetorical to say you drink made in Italy. And I do believe that when you drink champagne, you have that French texture. When you drink cava, you have the Spanish twist. And when you drink Franciacorta, you have the Italian element.
I love it. I love it. You speak so beautifully, Jamario. Thank you so much. Great. So I'll just finish up with a little bit about the conclusions of these two wines before we open up for a few questions. So when we talk about the level 3 and the level 4, we are using Blick to formulate our quality level. So let's talk about the level 3. We're looking at which is balance, length, intensity, and complexity. So we have to look at each of those things. Balance is a balance between the concentration, that fruit or any sweetness, and the other components in the wine, whether it's the acidity, the tannin, the alcohol. So it's the balance between those things, especially, even at the diploma level, you're really looking at it when it comes to sparkling wines. Of course, you're looking at, the acidity versus the sweetness is going to be a big one to comment on. But with back to the Blick, the length, you want it to have that long, like our, that minute that it goes on, is just this long length. In intensity, we want it to be at the ends of the scale. Medium, plus, or pronounced, will give us the intensity mark towards the Blick. And complexity, we want, of course, if you have primary, secondary, and tertiary aromas and flavors, you're going to be probably in the complexity realm. And so we have complexity here for sure. So we have all 4, which is going to make the wine outstanding. Because pretty much, remember, when it comes to level 3, you're not going to get a faulty or a poor wine in the exam. So if you have all 4 things in Blick, you're going to have an outstanding wine. If you have 3 of the 4, then you'll have a very good wine. 2 of those things, good. 1 of those things, acceptable wine. So that's how they do it using the Blick system. Now with diploma, Blick is just your jumping off point. You will use the Blick system, but then you need to explain each and every one, right? Balance. What is balanced? You can't just say the acidity is balanced by the fruit. You need to get into it. So you need to talk about you might be talking about the autolytic character, right? Beautiful, rich autolytic character, is balanced by the vibrant acidity. If you don't have to mention medium plus or high acidity, use other words for it. Go ahead and be eloquent like Jamario. You can use here in that conclusion, that quality conclusion, other terms. So how something balances between 2 things, explaining it. And then, of course, when it comes to your further, if you don't mind, Christian, going back to the level 3, we do have to comment, as well as the quality, we have to comment on the level of readiness for drinking. We generally don't use the too young and the too old. It's whether, can you drink it now, but it has the potential for aging, or is it just drink now, it's not suitable for aging, or drink now, not suitable for further aging because you notice it's had some aging on it. You have to ask yourself 2 questions, and it's the same 2 questions that you ask yourself to do it on the diploma SAT chart. 1, is there something structural about the wine that will allow it to age, right? So your acidity, of course, tannin in a red wine. But acidity here, right? We've got this high acidity from this 2009. And in fact, the acidity, we haven't mentioned much, but we have the second wine here, which is a pale lemon color, but it's a 214 vintage. I mean, this is an incredibly youthful looking wine with some beautiful complexity and tertiary on the nose. But it's 214, which is pretty incredible. But anyway, wines like these, you ask yourself, does it have something structurally that will allow it to age? Yes, the acidity. But it can't just be that, or then we'd be telling people to go age a $10, Pinot Grigio from the Veneto, right? So it also has to be, is this something that will get better, get more interesting with age, gain tertiary, and become more interesting so that it's worth it for you to recommend that it be cellared because it's going to get better? And so remarkably, I even wrote down that this 2009 vintage, certainly the 214 vintage, and even the rosé here is incredible. Each of these has the acidity and can take on some even additional complexity and tertiary, making it would be really fun. Can we do this again in 3 years, Jamario?
Let's do that next year.
These wines would age beautifully. Now, in addition, one last thing from me, I know you want to hear a little bit more from Jamario before we sign off, but when we talk about diploma, there's also other things to consider, right? You may be asked about the method of production when it comes to the sparkling wine. They want to know something like tank or traditional method. They don't want you to say something like it has the typicity of, Champagne or Franciacorta, or Cava or, whatever. They don't want you to say that. So you want to be answering, your tank or your traditional, and you're going to have to defend it. So you're going to have to say why. And of course, one of the main things you're looking for, one of the easies, is autolytic character that you don't find, in the tank method. So the rich autolytic character, points to a bottle fermented wine is something that you might want to say to defend your choice. You may also be asked to go ahead and talk about the style within the category. And so I just want to clear this up here, that when we're talking about a category, the category is like Franciacorta, Champagne, Cava. That's what the category is. And the style within the category is not anything to do with your varietal composition. So it's not Blanc de Blanc, it's not a style. Even though we call it like that in the industry, for the WSET and for diploma, you don't want to say a Blanc de Blanc or a sweetness level. For whatever country, whatever wine it is, you're not saying it's a brut style, or that's not what they're looking to hear, right? So they want to hear things like, is it a vintage? Is it a non-vintage? Is it a rosé? They want to know those are your styles within a category that they're looking to hear. And you'll have to defend those as well. So, of course, if you see a deep concentration of color, you could say, the deep color and the intense concentration of the primary with also additional tertiary, points to sparkling wine with some extended aging, right? And such as a vintage. And then you'd be defending why you're saying it's a vintage style within your category. Okay, I know I'm geeking out a little bit. And
it's very important what you're precising, because a vocabulary is essential for the communication. So the WSET has a wonderful way of describing wines, and it's important to learn this terminology to make sure that when you talk, you are understood. The communication, the real goal of communication is not on the person talking, is on the person listening. So having a common vocabulary is essential, and you're doing a great job.
No, thank you so much, Jamario. So could you leave us with, some final words on like what you would pair with a vintage, with this vintage Franciacorta, something you would pair with this beautiful salmon rosé?
I'm gonna think a moment out of the box, okay? For the dosaggio zero, I already mentioned the carpaccio, beef carpaccio with the bean salad, which is very refreshing, summery. We're in California, and also it goes very well with the acidity, the succulence of the meat, and so forth. For the rosé, I would like to think about why don't we grill some meat? We can grill some sausages, some ribs. Also, don't forget, I got this fantastic pomegranate scent at some point. And I like also to connect. Like if you cook, you use the same wine possibly that you drink with, right? So if you have this kind of descriptor, try to find in your recipe the idea to cook something together with. So how about, to change completely scenario, a lobster salad with pomegranate seed and arugula? How about that?
Jamario.
I also have a restaurant. I stole this recipe from a chef I adore. I adore. I won't mention the restaurant maybe because it's not the case, but he came out with a recipe that has medieval origin, by the way. Going to the Satèn, which is sort of my weak point lately, I go with what is typical in Franciacorta and can be enjoyable in California as well as everywhere around the world. Saffron risotto. I like the creaminess of the risotto with the aromatic persistence, the importance of the saffron. We're talking about something typical of Lombardy, typical of Franciacorta, and also something extremely good to pair with a good Satèn. And when you see the photos of the tiny flowers opening up with the center, you need to pick with your hands, tiny fingers, not mine. These are too big, okay? You also understand why the terrific work behind a big price of a saffron bag. But I like to go with that grana and saffron and a buttery risotto for this. Fried cream, crema fritta. When you go for a wedding in Italy, it's mandatory in your appetizer to see olive alla scolana and fried cream, because you have some little fattiness and oiliness and greasiness, and here you have a wonderful acidity to rinse your palate and go for a second bite. Acidity, as you mentioned more than one time, is a key point for the wine, for the food pairing and for the life of the wine. Down. So, beginning of a life of wine.
Jamario, and I look forward to hearing from you again. But let's just, if we can, because we've gone way over time.
Yes.
We're so thankful. Thank you for all that time. I don't know, Christian, if there's any burning questions we need to answer before we sign off.
Yeah, we do actually have a question.
But we can't hear you.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me now?
Oh,
not yet.
Still can't hear you. Maybe you can pull them up.
You can probably hear me better now. So we have a question about the glasses that you have in front of you. Can you talk a little bit about the special glass? Is it a special shape for Franciacorta?
These are glasses designed specifically for Franciacorta. You can also see the logo maybe of Franciacorta right here. The shape is important because the flute is visually nice because you see the bubble, the chain of bubbles running up. But what you want is this sort of a tulip shape cut at the very before the edge of this glass in order to help the fragrances coming out. What happens when you smell pomegranate seeds or so for descriptors? It's not that we have, of course, the elements in the wine. These are molecules that are running up at the surface of the glass. They break and they give us the remnants of something. So the shape of the glass and the quality of the crystal will help the molecules of the wine running up and get into our nose to facilitate the tasting. So it's the suggested glass from Franciacorta, designed from Franciacorta. Is it available in the market? That's a good question. I don't think so. But we're going to probably put together some Franciacorta quizzes and maybe be able to ship some glasses to someone who deserves it. That's a good idea.
I love it.
I like that. I like it. Well, thank you both so much for an awesome education on Franciacorta. You made me thirsty. I think I'm the only one who doesn't have glasses in front of me. So I know I'm going to head to the cellar and pull out a bottle of Satèn for this evening. Already looking forward to it. Thanks to everyone who joined us today. If you have any lingering questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the comments section and we will get back to you. In the meantime, join us again on Monday for our Facebook trivia, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And then our next study hall next Wednesday, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I want to thank both of you so much for all your energy and all the information you shared with our viewers and wish you a safe rest of the week.
Thank you, Christian.
And we have a wonderful podcast together and we're going to keep talking about Franciacorta. And at that time, you will be no longer a thirsty man.
I'm very much looking forward to that.
Thank you for the wonderful opportunity and stay safe and cheer up, everybody.
Cheers.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Ciao.
See you on Monday. Ciao.
Cheers.